All right, so the open topic of today, we will be discussing and ranking the heroic actions. We're going to be focusing on the special heroic actions, so not going to discuss heroic move, heroic shoot, and heroic combat, since they are the most common. Every hero has access to them, basically. But we'll be touching on the remaining 8 heroic actions. So the 8 that we have in the rules are heroic strike, heroic march, heroic defense, heroic channel, heroic strength, heroic accuracy, heroic resolve, and heroic challenge. So I guess the obvious question that we can get out of the way first is, which ones would you guys say are the best ones and the obvious worst one?
So I think we've touched on this multiple times in previous profile reviews, but I think we're pretty much on the same page when it comes to the big 3. And I would say the order goes down as heroic strike as being the best, heroic march as being the second best, and third would be heroic defense.
Yeah, just you need access to those in basically almost every list you write, right? You need at least a strike in your list, just because it allows you to deal with big threats, or at least have an option to try and fight them. So without that, it makes your game plan a lot harder. The same thing goes for March, just having the option in there when it comes up, when you need it, you need it. And there's nothing around that, right? In Seize the Prize, if it comes up, if your opponent has March and you don't, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, immediately.
Yeah, I'd agree with this ordering. I think strike might not be the most reliable heroic action, just because let's say you're a fight 3 hero and you're striking up against a fight 6 or 7. It's not guaranteed that you'll roll high enough to tie or beat that hero. And even if you do, it's not guaranteed that you're going to win the duel. You're going to roll high in your combat as well. So I definitely think that you can have a winning list without a strike. There are other things in the game you can throw in, like Transfix or Bat Swarm, the One Ring, stuff like that. But it helps in most situations. In most situations, it's good to have strike on a hero. March, it's good, maybe not in every scenario. I think it's always good to have March in an army. And defense makes a hero a lot more survivable. So I think it does deserve to be in the top 3.
Yeah, I don't think any of these are necessary to win a game in particular, but it's just, I think when people generally build lists, we definitely make a conscious effort to include heroes with strike and march. So I think those 2 in particular are the most important.
Alex, anything to add before we move on?
I think all along we've been in agreement on those top 3. A list without strike is really limited, especially from an evil standpoint, I think, more so than good. But if you come up against a list that has strike and you don't, you're really playing a completely different game style than what you probably were planning on. March is always useful. It doesn't always get used every game, but it's kind of that you never leave home without it kind of situation. You always want the option, just because there are going to be scenarios where you need to do it. There's scenarios where your opponent might be trying to kite you and you have to chase after them. So if they're flying away from you and shooting at you, you're going to have to move quickly. And then heroic defense, being able to bunker down in a situation where you might be surrounded, force your opponent to roll natural 6s to wound. Having that is just always valuable. I think when I see one of those 3 in a hero's profile, it's automatically a bonus, where the other ones might be more conditional. Those ones are almost always a constant.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Is when you're looking for heroes, when I'm personally looking for heroes to put in my list, I always look for these 3 to include, and then the other ones is kind of if they have it, it's okay, cool, neat. That's another thing in the toolbox I have. But these are always the ones that are okay, I've got to get at least a strike, and I really need to try and get a march in. Is usually how I like to build my list. But that's more of a personal preference thing. But it is what it is.
Okay, so we're pretty much in agreement on the best heroic actions. Now, is there an obvious worst heroic action? I'm thinking heroic challenge. What do you
Easily heroic challenge. I don't think I've seen heroic challenge used once, maybe once in a very thematic moment in a friendly game. But no, I don't think I've actually seen player use it and have to spend a might point to do it.
I'm inclined to agree with you, but I've never seen somebody use resolve either. And I have actually seen somebody use challenge, even though we were just experimenting.
Just to go back to challenge for a second, it was updated in one of the FAQs, maybe last year, where they tried to encourage people by using it by adding additional penalties for declining. I think it was that you couldn't call Standfast if you turned down a challenge. I think that's what it was. But I didn't notice really a difference in the community in terms of using this heroic action. I still think that it's so easy to counter it either by striking or just declining and then having the challenger lose their point of might.
I think everybody was already scared off of it from like when Edition initially launched. So when they made that change, everybody was still very hesitant to use it. I honestly think if like every hero had access to challenge, it would be rated higher because there are only certain situations when you actually want to use it, like you said, because generally you want to use it against a hero who's the same tier as you or higher, and you usually don't want to do it against another hero that has strike. Because they'll just strike up, they'll win that combat, they'll do wounds, right? On that first round, and they might kill you. Because it's so restricted in like how to use it, I think if everybody had it, it actually would get used a lot more. But because you want to be in those specific situations or circumstances, it's really hard.
I'd agree. I mean, obviously, I think if every hero had it, that automatically would make usage of that action go up, just because you'd be able to use it with smaller heroes to try and slow down something larger. But the only hero that I've seen where I thought that might be useful is Shagrat, overrated hero of Serathungal, where he's a hero of fortitude, so you can either use it on other captain level heroes where they can't strike, or because I think Shagrat, for me at least, would usually be my secondary hero, being able to throw him into a bigger hero and then force the opponent to at least focus on Shagrat for a little bit, kind of make him the focal point, and he's not my main hero. That might be useful, but that's very conditional still. And that's conditional within a condition, because that condition is that I have Shagrat, and that he's my secondary hero, and that I'm facing a hero that doesn't have strike.
That's actually a good shot on Shagrat, though, because he does have Blood and Glory as well, so he can regenerate some extra might back there as well. So once you do get locked into a hero that you want to fight, you can burn the rest of your might and not worry too much. So I think he's the only one that it might be a viable option to call challenge on.
Maybe alerts from the new Legion as well, since it's a specialized one.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Shagrat shoutout is great. Like, I would actively think about using it if I was running him. I'd probably think about using that, like, every game. Just going and picking on, like, any heroes of fortitude in the enemy list. Like, okay, you're going at them, you're going to challenge them, and no matter how they react, you come out, like, with a net positive, basically.
Yeah, he can outfight a lot of other fortitude and higher, even some valors, I think. But the fact that we're just talking about Shagrat now just shows how limited this heroic action is. Now, Ian also mentioned Heroic Resolve as one of the worst. I agree that it's uncommon. I've almost never seen it used. I've seen it used maybe 2 times before, and the main reason is just, I think, because the hero calling it cannot move. So I think in a situation where you want the extra magic resistance, it would have to be in a situation where you don't need the hero to fight that turn, or the hero is one that isn't great at combat in the first place. So the one that I can think of that has Resolve is Durbers, because most of the time you don't want him to fight, and you could just have him camp in the back, and his Heroic Resolve would really help like your Moria monsters, which also have magic resistance, so you could stack and just give him more protection. But other than that, yeah, I don't know how many heroes that you would want to just give up a turn of movement for that.
The thing with Resolve is that a lot of heroes who have it are also combat heroes. Like the one that comes to mind is Aragorn, and unless you're just waiting for battle lines to clash, you're almost never going to want to spend a point of might on a big combat hero to do that, right? Unless maybe you're playing against an Angmar list. I don't know. I feel like there's better things you can spend your might on. But like, yeah, okay, I guess like a support hero. Like I think Frodo has it. That's one that's coming to mind, or maybe it's Bilbo. Like a support hero who doesn't need to be in combat, like you said, that's where I would consider it more. But I don't think I've ever really thought about it in a game, honestly.
Yeah, and Resolve is 3 inches, right?
6 inches.
6 inches.
Yeah, it's quite conditional. I think you call it right after priority, so that's before you know which models might be targeted by magic that turn. Okay, so we have 3 heroic actions remaining in the middle. I think it'd be interesting to get you guys' opinion on how you would rank the remaining 3. So they are Heroic Channeling, Heroic Strength, and Heroic Accuracy.
I think personally, Channel is a little hard to rank because they usually come with anyone who can cast magical powers. So, and a lot of the magical powers are very useful to be able to channel. So it's almost to me like, how necessary is it to have magic in a list? And I think even though it's not a requirement for a competitive list, I think adding magic is a very strong tool. So I would probably have to rank channel as the strongest out of these three. And then next, I would say heroic strength. I honestly think heroic strength is very underrated. So certain examples that I've called with is on Guahir or other monsters. It would be very similar. But if you're going for the hurl, it increases your distance of the hurl if you win the combat, which is very useful. And also on the defense, if you're being charged by cavalry or a monstrous mount, if you are the infantry model, you can call a heroic strength. And if you get a higher strength than the opponent, then you actually won't get knocked to the ground. So I think strength is very underrated. So I'd rank that next. I would say lastly is accuracy, which is still useful, but I think with this recent nerf of where you can't re-roll to hit the mount, really limited the use. So I would place that third out of these bunch.
From what I can think of on the spot, I think only like Barrel White and Thranduil's Circlet can't cast a channeled version. I mean, Barrel White doesn't have might anyway, but in the rare situation that it does gain might, I guess. So I think obviously there are some channeled versions that are better than others. Like you probably almost never use like a channeled Sorcerer's Blast. So it is a little bit conditional, but if you get a hero with a really important, really critical spell like Blinding Light, having the ability to channel makes it so much better. So I agree with it being fourth. You mentioned some good uses of heroic strength. One more that I can think of is some combat heroes that are stuck at strength 4 with no modifiers. Sometimes they'll have trouble killing. And in certain combats where they don't have to worry about heroic strike, heroic strength is great because it gives them the ability to just chop through whatever they need to kill. So an example, at Nova, when I charged Boromir, Captain of the White Tower, into the Great Beast of Gorgoroth, I didn't go with the Lance option. I went with a Banner option. So he's fight 7, but he's wounding the Great Beast on 6s. Having that heroic strength, the ability to go up to strength 7 potentially, he was able to wound them on 4s instead. So yeah, I think heroic strength is definitely underrated. Yeah, I have the exact same thoughts as you on accuracy.
I'm not gonna add much to the conversation, honestly. Yeah, channel is just like the next most useful one, so I'd put it first, just because like Charles mentioned, like the blinding light is big. The only one I could think of that I regularly channel mobilizes is still like a big threat. And I've only had it done to me once, but it was really scary. A channeled fireball from Saruman on it was one of my heroes who was like out of will, so he couldn't resist it. And it's actually a pretty big threat against a hero who is like a main combat hero once they're in fighting and they're out of will. Putting that fireball on them is actually, the channel fireball on them is pretty big.
I also channel Flame Burst, one of your dwarf heroes, with my Carduche.
Oh, yeah. That was so annoying. I think you killed him in the last turn with that and like a black dart. Yeah, you killed Thror with it. Oh,
Thror, yeah.
So annoying. So yeah, channeling is definitely next. And then what do we have? We had strength. Yeah, I tend to agree with Charles and Richard that the strength is underrated. I don't know if I've ever used it, honestly, because I'm stuck in the mentality of, if I used to be able to do this for free if I had an axe. Now it costs a might point. That's silly. But there are definitely some uses for it. I could really see this spot going to accuracy or strength, because I think both of them have like much more rare conditions when you do want to use it. But like when you want to use it, it's super handy to have. Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this recap episode. Before we get to the rest of the segment, I just want to remind everyone to please like the video if you enjoy this content, and please consider subscribing to the channel, as we have a whole bunch of new content coming your way, and subscribing means that you'll be notified whenever a new video is posted. Thank you all very much for tuning in. Now on to the rest of this segment.
I think the reason why I would put accuracy below strength is because it requires you to set it up. Like, unless it's like turn 1 or turn 2 in the game, you want enough archers beside the hero calling it, and it has to be a hero that can call heroic accuracy. And even then, you finally have 6 to 8 or 10 archers around the hero. You think that you have enough to make the accuracy worthwhile. You don't know how many are going to hit. So to me, there's a lot of risk in calling accuracy for your point of might.
Yeah,
I've definitely called
definitely
accuracy with I've definitely called accuracy with Thrashcube before, and it has definitely not paid off. Just because I would have him surrounded by 12 crossbows, I'd think now is the time. I'm gonna heroic accuracy my way through to my opponent's general and at least, make him burn some resources. And then Thrashcube hits with one of his shots, and 3 of my 12 crossbows hit. And it is then just a wasted point of might. So I think I've got to agree with the general consensus. Heroic channel of those 3 is probably the most useful. It's the most widely used. Isn't channel transfix just what transfix was in the last edition?
Yeah, it halves their fight value in attacks.
Yeah, late game if you're trying to bring down an opponent's general and you've already targeted him a bunch that game, that can be really useful. If you target him throughout the game so that he has no will points, and you get him in combat with one of your heroes, and you do that, that can be really helpful. Obviously, it doesn't come up as much. I mean, it does really with general shamans, just because I still find the use in channeling Fury start of the game. But definitely with other spellcasters, almost always, like at least once, I'll channel something, especially late game. So that's always useful. Strength, I don't think I've ever actually used it, but Richard brought up a few really good uses for it. I think I'll keep that in mind. I think it might be especially useful with dwarf heroes because they do have the axe. Then you could stack that, right? Get +1 for piercing strike, get another bonus for heroic strength, make some pretty meaty dwarf heroes. Heroic accuracy, like I've said, paid off for me maybe once, but it's really, for me, to include a pun that I didn't plan on saying, but here it is. It's a real shot in the dark. Just kind of throw it out there and really hope that it works. But the number of times it doesn't work compared to the number of times it does work is low. So I really think that's just kind of a Hail Mary pass one, where you're kind of like looking for something, but sometimes it doesn't pan out the way you want it to, and it ends up being kind of a poorly spent point of might. Has its moments, but no, not like the other 2.
Okay.
I agree with that. Yeah, accuracy, I don't think I haven't used it in a long time. It definitely does seem like a desperation move, like you said. Like, it's not something you're going to want to, or personally, I'd never, like, go out of my way to use an accuracy. I just look to find other uses for that might.
Now that we've gone through all the heroic actions, looking at the order that we place them in, are there any specific orderings that you guys would disagree with and would want to bring up?
I was kind of thinking swap strength and accuracy, but now that I've thought about it more, I think strength does come in just above accuracy for me. Yeah, I'm also just thinking about it like, I think like Alex kind of mentioned it too, with strength you kind of want to stack it with other things. So I'm thinking about 4 long, strength 5, strike, lance. That's a lot of damage.
I have one that's, I don't know if it's unpopular, but I would consider swapping strike and march.
Booing intensifies.
Before this episode, I saw them almost as equals, and I'm just thinking, having strike, to me, it's valued differently depending on what hero the strike is on. Because I'm thinking like Groblog, who is a fight 3 hero that can strike, it's not as big of a deal compared to like a hero from the Rohan list that needs strike in order to fight heroes from other armies. However, compared to March is pretty much good on any hero. You just have to put the hero in the position that you need for the troops to march. But other than that, it doesn't really matter who you call it with. It's all valued equally. So I think just the consistency of the march, as long as your hero doesn't get charged before he marches, it really can't go wrong. And so I'm tempted to put march a little bit higher than strike.
I'd say you are correct if you're looking at it from an angle of which one is more likely to pay off for the point of might. But I think if you're looking at which one is more likely to have the largest impact, it's almost always strike, especially late game. We talk about a lot of these situations, getting them in late game, because the later the game gets, the fewer resources everybody has, the more powerful each of these heroic actions really become. Being able to do any of these things when your opponent might have a hard time countering you and you really pull something off like striking up and having a smaller hero knock off your opponent's general, or a hero that you're targeting in a game where you have to target a hero or the objective is to get rid of enemy heroes. Those things are big. And I think late game, that is definitely bigger than March. Although at the same time, if it's objective based and you're looking to run to something, Heroic March is big. But late game, you're going to have fewer models to do that with, and fewer that can actually afford to move that distance without charging anyone. So I still think Strike is bigger, because Strike is really the ability to fight a hero, come back the next time and say, my powers have doubled since the last time we met. I'm sorry, that's the last prequel meme for the night.
What is up with you today?
I don't know.
Alex is in a very specific mood today. And I love it.
I don't know what today is. Today is a very tiring Wednesday is what today is. I didn't sleep well last night. Can you tell?
It's showing a little bit. I use Strike in probably like a lot of my games. Like it comes up a lot in like the majority of the games I have. And March, while still super important, it just doesn't come up in as many. So I think that's probably why I rank it higher than the rest. As a side note, I don't know if anybody would disagree with me. I know 100% the action I use the most is probably Heroic Move, even though they're not talking about those ones. So I don't know, maybe it's kind of a relative thing. I don't use March that much, but I think it is super important.
Well, if we're going to go into the basic ones, I'll say I like Heroic Combat better.
I don't know. The second we pull the basic ones that every hero gets into the mix, it just really throws everything out of whack. So then you've got to reconsider everything. Between move and combat, like obviously those two I probably use more than anything else. And at that point, I've got to go back to the drawing board and reconsider everything. So don't make me do that at this time of night. We're not going to do it.
Okay, so I think we decided on Strike is the most important, right? Even though Charles does have a pretty solid argument against it. Yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So we got Strike, then March, then Defense, then Channel, then Strength, Accuracy, Resolve, and Challenge.
Okay, so that has been our ranking and discussion of the special heroic actions of the game. Thank you all for listening, and look forward to the next episode of Into the West.